Velthara stood in the briefing room of the Coalition warship, crystalline arms crossed over their chest. The Tveen officer watched the humans file in with barely hidden disgust. They were so small, so soft. Their bodies had no natural armor, no sharp edges, no protective shells, just pink and brown flesh wrapped around fragile bones. The humans moved differently too. Where Tven warriors glided with grace, these creatures shuffled and stomped. They made unnecessary noise. They touched things constantly, adjusting their uniforms, checking their weapons, running hands through the fur that grew from their heads. "Attention!" A human sergeant called out. His voice was rough, damaged somehow. The humans called him Tae-min. Velthara noticed the scars immediately. This Tae-min had lines across his face, marks where his flesh had torn and healed incorrectly. The Taeven officer felt a flicker of pity. On their homeworld, such damaged individuals would have been retired from service, given easier work. "We've got a new addition to the squad," Taemin continued. He gestured toward Velthara. "This is Officer Velthara from the T-Ven Collective. Command wants us to run joint operations." The humans turned to look. Velthara stood taller, their crystalline body catching the light. At 7 feet tall, they towered over every human in the room. Their natural armor gleamed, beautiful and functional. This was what a warrior should look like. One of the humans stepped forward, young, male, with dark eyes that seemed too calm. "Welcome to the squad. I'm Hyun-woo." Velthara did not extend a hand. The human gesture was primitive. "I am here because the Coalition requires it, not because I desire to be." Hyun-woo's expression did not change. He simply nodded and returned to his seat. The other humans showed no offense. Perhaps they were too simple to understand. A female human with her hair tied back stood next. "I'm G1. I handle medical." She smiled, and Velthara noticed her teeth. Flat, mostly. Designed for grinding plant matter, not tearing flesh. Yet something about that smile felt wrong. Too wide, too eager. "Medical duties during combat are inefficient," Velthara stated. "Injured warriors should withdraw or be left behind. Resources should focus on those who can fight." The room went quiet. Several humans exchanged glances. Then G1's smile grew wider. "We don't leave people behind." "Irrational," Velthara replied. Taemin cleared his throat. "Let's get to the briefing. We've got a mission." The holographic display activated, showing a mining colony on a distant moon. Red markers covered most of the structures. "The Ravagers took mining station Epsilon 3 days ago," Taemin explained. 2,000 colonists were stationed there. "We've received no communication since the attack." Velthara studied the display. The Ravagers were insectoid creatures, vicious and numerous. They fought in swarms, overwhelming positions through sheer numbers. "The colonists are dead. This should be a bombing mission, not a recovery. There might be survivors in the underground sections," Hyun-woo said quietly. "We go in. We check. We bring them home. The probability of survivors is less than 5%, Velthara calculated aloud. "The risk to this squad is unacceptable for such low odds." A human with an equipment pack covered in strange symbols spoke up. Her name was Su Bin, and her eyes held a disturbing brightness. "We've done worse odds. Remember the Titan Station extraction? Taemin? Taemin. The sergeant nodded. 3% odds. We still got 40 people out. And how many of you died?" Velthara demanded. "Half the squad," Taemin said simply. "We got 40 people out." The logic made no sense. Trading warrior lives for civilians at such rates would destroy any military force within months. Yet the humans spoke of it as if it were normal, even admirable. "Your species will not survive long with such tactics," Velthara observed. Hyun-woo checked his weapon, a chemical projectile thrower that seemed crude compared to Taven energy lances. We've survived 40,000 years of recorded history, most of it trying to kill each other. I think we'll manage. The briefing continued. Drop zone, enemy estimates, extraction points, standard military planning. Velthara committed it all to memory, noting the inefficiencies in the human approach. They planned for too many contingencies, wasted time on backup plans for backup plans. When the briefing ended, the humans began equipment checks. Velthara watched Hyunwoo disassemble his weapon completely, inspect each part, then reassemble it. Then, he did it again. Your weapon was functional the first time, Velthara noted. Probably. Hyunwoo agreed, starting a third check. Then why repeat the process? Because probably isn't good enough when someone's life depends on it. Velthara walked away, confused and irritated. The human checked his weapon 7 more times before they boarded the dropship. Inside the transport, the humans prepared in strange ways. Ji-won hummed a melody while organizing her medical supplies. Subin told jokes that made no sense. Something about explosives and timing. A thin human named Mina sat perfectly still, eyes closed, breathing slowly. Velthara secured themselves in the crash harness, crystalline form fitting awkwardly into the human-sized seat. Across from them, Hyunwoo stared at nothing. Face blank. Are you afraid? Velthara asked, curious despite themselves. Hyunwoo's eyes focused on the Taven officer. Yes. You admit this weakness? Being afraid isn't weakness. Being afraid, and still doing what needs to be done. That's the job. The dropship shuddered as it entered atmosphere. Velthara felt the gravity shift, the temperature rise. Through the small windows, the mining colony came into view. Smoke rose from a dozen fires. Structures lay collapsed. Dark shapes moved between buildings. Ravagers. Thousands of them. 30 seconds, the pilot announced. The humans checked their weapons one final time. Ji-won's smile returned. Subin laughed at something only she found funny. Taemin cracked his neck, the bones making a wet popping sound that made Velthara's crystalline stomach turn. 10 seconds. Velthara noticed something then. The humans' bodies had changed. Their pupils had dilated. Their skin flushed with blood. Their breathing had quickened but remained controlled. Their muscles tensed, ready to spring. They looked eager. 5 seconds. Hyunwoo caught Velthara staring. For just a moment, something flickered in his dark eyes. Drop. The doors exploded open. The humans launched themselves out, falling toward a moon full of enemies, and every single one of them was smiling. Velthara followed, feeling a strange unease settle into their crystalline bones. The humans had looked wrong in that moment before the drop. Not afraid. Not even brave. They had looked like they were going home. The landing was chaos. The dropship touched down hard, throwing Velthara against their harness. Before the Taven officer could fully orient themselves, the humans were already moving, pouring out of the transport with their weapons raised. Velthara followed, energy lance ready. The colony looked worse up close. Buildings had been torn open like flesh, their metal walls peeled back. Bodies lay scattered, most partially consumed. The air tasted of smoke and something else, something organic and rotting. Form up, Taemin ordered. The humans moved into a formation that looked sloppy to Velthara's trained eye. Too spread out, too much individual freedom. Taven squads moved as one unit, each warrior knowing their exact position. The first ravagers appeared within minutes. 3 of the insectoid creatures skittered around a corner, their mandibles clicking. Each stood 6 feet tall on 4 legs, with razor-sharp claws and armor plating that could deflect most energy weapons. Velthara raised their lance, preparing to fire a measured, efficient shot. Before they could, the air erupted with sound. The humans opened fire with their chemical weapons, dozens of projectiles tearing into the ravagers. The creatures fell, their bodies torn apart by the sustained barrage. Clear, Hyunwoo called out. Velthara stared at the corpses. That was excessive. 3 shots would have been sufficient. 3 shots might have been enough, G1 said, already moving forward. Might. We don't do might when bugs are trying to kill us. The squad advanced into the colony. Velthara maintained proper tactical spacing, moving from cover to cover as their training demanded. The humans moved differently. They flowed like water, constantly adjusting, checking corners with quick glances. Weapons always pointing toward potential threats. Subin walked slightly ahead, her eyes scanning the ground. Tripwire, she announced, kneeling beside something Velthara could barely see. Ravagers are learning to set traps. Tripwire, fall back to safe distance. Velthara commanded automatically. Subin laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. Safe distance from an alien trap? There's no such thing. She pulled out a small tool and began working on the wire. Her hands moved with disturbing steadiness, completely calm, while one wrong move could kill her. You should use a drone, Velthara insisted. Drone's in my pack. I'm already here. Subin cut something. The tension in the wire released. Clear. They continued deeper. The colony's main street opened before them, 100 yards of open ground with buildings on both sides. Perfect ambush territory. We should go around, Velthara suggested. The tactical disadvantage. Ravagers poured out of the buildings. Dozens of them. Maybe 100. They flooded the street. Mandibles clicking. Claws scraping metal. It was exactly the ambush Velthara had predicted. Contact! Taemin shouted. And the world became violence. The humans did not retreat. They did not even pause. They simply started killing. Velthara fired their lance, each shot precise and controlled. Energy bolts struck Ravager heads, efficient kills. But the Taven officer could not kill fast enough. The creatures kept coming, a wave of chitin and hunger. Then Velthara saw something that made their crystalline blood run cold. Hyunwoo's weapon ran empty. Instead of falling back to reload in safety, the human simply dropped the weapon and pulled a blade from his belt. He stepped forward, into the mass of Ravagers, and began cutting. The blade was primitive, just sharpened metal. But Hyunwoo moved, like nothing Velthara had ever seen. He ducked under one Ravager's claws, drove his knife up into its throat, twisted, withdrew. When a Ravager's claw opened a deep cut across his arm, Hyunwoo did not even flinch. Blood ran down his hand, making his grip slippery, but he just kept killing. G1 was laughing. The medic had moved to the side, firing her weapon in controlled bursts. Then a Ravager leapt at her, claws extended. The creature's strike hit home, tearing through G1's armor and into her side. Velthara saw the flesh tear, saw blood spray. The human should have fallen, should have screamed, should have died. Instead, G1 grabbed the Ravager's claw while it was still embedded in her body, pulled out a sidearm with her other hand, and shot the creature point-blank in the face. Then she yanked the claw out of her side, blood pouring from the wound, and pulled out a medical injector. She stabbed herself in the leg with it, and Velthara watched her pupils dilate even further. Whatever chemical she had just introduced into her body, it was not just a painkiller. Ji-won's movements became faster, sharper. She reloaded her weapon and continued firing, that terrible smile never leaving her face. Ji-won is severely wounded, Velthara shouted. I'm fine, Ji-won called back, shooting another Ravager. Subin had found her way to a pile of rubble. A Ravager had tackled her, and the weight of both of them caused the pile to collapse. Dust and broken concrete cascaded down, burying them both. Velthara prepared to mark the human as deceased. Then the rubble exploded outward. Subin climbed out, covered in dust and blood, her left arm hanging at a wrong angle. Broken. Clearly broken. The human looked down at her mangled arm, said something in her own language that the translator marked as profanity, and used her good hand to pull out her sidearm. She fired one-handed into the Ravagers, laughing the entire time. This is going to hurt tomorrow. Velthara fought in a daze, unable to process what they were seeing. The humans were taking damage that would incapacitate any Tven warrior. They were bleeding, broken, being torn apart by claws and mandibles. And they were not stopping. Mina, the quiet sniper, had positioned herself on top of a ruined vehicle. She fired with mechanical precision, each shot dropping a ravager. Then one of the creatures climbed up behind her. Its claw came down, stabbing through her leg and pinning her to the metal roof. The human's face contorted in pain, but her hands never stopped moving. She twisted, shot the ravager that had impaled her, then calmly pulled her leg off the claw. Velthara could see bone through the wound. Mina wrapped something around her leg, tied it tight, and continued shooting. The fight lasted 10 minutes. It felt like hours. When the last ravager fell, Velthara stood among the corpses, lance still ready, trying to understand what had just happened. The humans regrouped. They were covered in blood, most of it their own. Every single one had injuries that required immediate medical evacuation by any sane military standard. Sound off, Taemin ordered. Operational, Hyunwoo replied, using some kind of foam to seal the cut on his arm. Good to go, Ji-won said, injecting something else into her torn side. The bleeding slowed. Bit banged up, Subin announced, trying to move her broken arm and wincing. Nothing critical. Min-ah just gave a thumbs up, her legs still leaking blood despite the tourniquet. You are all injured, Velthara stated, their voice strange even to their own audio receptors. This mission must be aborted. Medical evacuation is required immediately. The humans looked at each other. Then Taemin shook his head. We just started. Colony's got another 3 kilometers of territory. Survivors might be in the underground shelters. ND, crime. ND. ND, you cannot continue in this condition. Hyunwoo checked his weapon, reloading it with steady hands despite the blood loss. This is nothing. You should see us when things get serious. Ji-won smiled that horrible smile again. Her uniform was soaked red on one side, but her eyes were bright and alert. Taemin's right. We haven't even gotten to the hard part yet. Ji-won, the hard part. This had been a light skirmish to them. Velthara looked at these soft, small, wounded creatures and felt something they had never felt before on a battlefield. Fear. Let's move, Taemin ordered. Daylight's burning. The humans walked deeper into the colony, limping and bleeding and smiling. And Velthara followed because orders were orders. But the Teveen officers' hands trembled on their lance, and they could not stop watching the humans, waiting for them to finally fall. They never did. Night fell across the mining colony like a predator's shadow. Velthara activated their enhanced vision, the world shifting into sharp clarity. The Tevan could see in almost total darkness, a natural advantage their species had evolved over millions of years. The humans could not. Their eyes were weak, designed for their bright homeworld. Yet they continued moving through the ruins without hesitation, using small lights attached to their weapons. The beams cut through the darkness, announcing their position to anything watching. This is foolish, Velthara stated. You are broadcasting your location. We should wait until sunrise. Can't wait. Taemin replied. If there are survivors, they've been trapped for 3 days. Every hour matters. You cannot see properly in these conditions. Hyunwoo moved ahead, his weapon light scanning left and right. We see enough, Velthara did not understand. The human's visual capacity was clearly impaired. By Teven standards, he was functionally blind, yet he moved with confidence, weapon always pointing toward threats before his light even found them. How are you detecting ravagers before you can see them? Velthara asked. Sound, smell, air movement. Hyunwoo paused, tilting his head. 3 of them. Northeast corner. 12 meters. Velthara's vision confirmed it a moment later. 3 ravagers. exactly where Hyunwoo indicated. The human had sensed them without seeing them, like some kind of primitive predator. It should not be possible with such inferior sensory equipment. The squad moved deeper into the colony's industrial sector. Massive machinery loomed in the darkness, casting strange shadows. Ji-won had treated everyone's wounds during a brief rest, using human medical technology that seemed crude but effective. She had sealed her own torn side with what she called a stapler, literally piercing her flesh with metal clips to hold it closed. Velthara had watched in horror as the human casually stapled her own skin, never making a sound except for occasional grunts. Now Ji-won moved like the injury did not exist, though blood still seeped through the bandage. "Contact," Mina whispered. The Ravagers came from above this time, dropping from the machinery like living rain. Dozens of them, coordinated and silent until the moment they attacked. The fight was brutal and close. Velthara used their lance at minimum range, the energy bolts barely having time to accelerate before striking chitin. The Tveen officer fought efficiently, killing 3 Ravagers in quick succession. Then one of the creatures got through their defense. Its claw struck Velthara's shoulder, and the Tveen officer felt their crystalline armor crack. Pain flooded their nervous system, sharp and overwhelming. Velthara stumbled back, training dictating a withdrawal to assess damage. Hyunwoo appeared beside them, his blade already moving. He killed the Ravager that had struck Velthara, then positioned himself between the Tveen officer and the swarm. "Get your head clear." Velthara clutched their shoulder, feeling the fractures in their natural armor. This was serious damage. They needed medical treatment, needed to withdraw from combat immediately. But Hyunwoo stood there with a hole in his arm from the earlier fight, with fresh cuts across his face from this ambush, and he was not withdrawing. He was fighting harder, protecting Velthara while killing anything that came close. "I am compromised," Velthara managed to say. "You're alive," Hyunwoo replied, driving his blade through a Ravager's eye. "That means you can still fight. Now shoot something." The logic was insane. Being alive did not mean being combat effective. But Velthara raised their lance anyway, and fired, dropping a Ravager that tried to flank them. The fight ended. The squad counted 7 dead Ravagers this time. Subin's broken arm had gotten worse during the combat, and she had resorted to fighting with her legs, kicking at Ravagers with disturbing efficiency. Now she sat on a piece of machinery, breathing hard, her face pale from blood loss and pain. "How much farther?" she asked. Taemin checked his tactical display. 2 kilometers to the underground entrance. Maybe another hour. "I can make it," Subin said. Velthara stared at her. The human's arm was destroyed. She had lost significant blood. She was operating on stimulants and determination. "You need evacuation. After we check the shelters," Subin replied. During the rest period, Velthara accessed their suit's computer and began researching human biology. What they found made their crystalline skin crawl. Humans had evolved on a death world. Not metaphorically, their planet was classified as a Type 9 hostile environment by Coalition standards. Everything on Earth tried to kill everything else. The plants were poisonous, the animals were venomous, diseased, or both. Even the weather could kill. Humans had survived by becoming the most efficient killers on their planet. They had hunted creatures 10 times their size by simply following them until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. They had survived injuries that would kill most species through sheer determination and an immune system that fought like a war machine. Velthara found historical records. Humans had fought wars against each other for thousands of years. They had developed weapons specifically to kill other humans, chemical weapons, biological weapons, nuclear weapons. They had used these weapons on themselves. One human war, marked in their records as World War II, had killed over 70 million humans, and they had just kept going, rebuilding, preparing for the next war. "Why?" Velthara whispered, staring at the data. "Why what?" Mina asked. The sniper was checking her leg wound, the bandage soaked through with blood. "Why do you fight like this? Why do you keep going when you should stop?" Mina was quiet for a moment. "Because stopping means dying. Or worse, It means someone else dies because we weren't there. That is irrational. Tactical withdrawal preserves resources for future engagements. Maybe for your people. Minna finished checking her wound and stood up, testing her weight. She could barely walk. For us, leaving people behind isn't an option. It's not about tactics or resources. It's about knowing we did everything possible, even if it kills you. Minna smiled. It was nothing like Ji-won's disturbing grin. This smile was sad and tired. Especially then. That's what makes us human. This. The squad moved on. Velthara followed. But everything had changed. The Tivan officer watched these creatures differently now. They were not just inefficient soldiers. They were not poorly designed for combat. They were something else entirely. Something that had clawed its way to the top of a hostile planet by refusing to die, refusing to quit, refusing to accept that anything was impossible. As they walked through the darkness, Velthara noticed something else. The humans were not just navigating by their weak lights. They were using sounds. Velthara barely registered the scrape of kitten on metal, the click of Ravager mandibles, the movement of air in enclosed spaces. They were hunting. Not fighting, not defending. Hunting. Moving through this colony the way their ancestors had moved through ancient forests, tracking prey with senses that should not work, but somehow did. Movement ahead, Hyunwoo said softly. Big group. Maybe 50. Velthara's vision confirmed it moments later. A large Ravager patrol. Moving between buildings. The tactical solution was obvious. Avoid contact. Circle around. Maintain mission security. Taemin studied the patrol for a moment. Then he smiled, and Velthara felt their stomach drop. It was the same expression the humans had worn before the first drop. Eager. Hungry. Subin, can you rig an explosive? The injured demolitionist nodded. With one hand? Easy. End today. Good. Hyunwoo. Ji-won. With me. Minna. Find elevation. Velthara. Suppressing fire on my mark. We should avoid engagement, Velthara protested. We are injured. Outnumbered. Outnumbered just means we don't run out of targets. Taemin replied. He checked his weapon one more time. That human ritual that made no sense. Ready? The humans nodded. All of them broken. Bleeding. Running on chemicals and stubbornness. All of them ready to fight 50 Ravagers because their sergeant had decided it was time. Go, Taemin ordered. Subin's explosive detonated, destroying a building and sending rubble crashing into the Ravager patrol. Before the creatures could recover, the humans attacked, pouring into the chaos like they belonged there. Velthara fired their lance, providing support, watching these impossible creatures fight like the universe itself was trying to kill them, and they simply did not care. Hyunwoo took a claw to the chest that should have killed him. The human pulled himself up, one hand pressed against the hole in his chest, and kept fighting. And Velthara understood, finally understood, what true terror felt like. It was not facing a stronger enemy. It was facing an enemy that would never stop. Could never stop. That would keep coming, no matter what you did to them. The Ravagers did not stand a chance. They never had. The entrance to the underground shelters was a gaping hole in the ground, surrounded by bodies. Human colonists, torn apart by Ravager claws. The squad paused at the edge, looking down into absolute darkness. Power's out, Taemin observed. Probably took the generators when they breached. Velthara stared into the blackness. Even their enhanced vision could not penetrate that depth. This is a natural kill zone. The Ravagers will have concentrated their forces inside. We will be fighting in enclosed spaces against unknown numbers with no retreat option. Yep, Taemin agreed. He checked his weapon again. That's where the survivors would be, though. Deep in the shelters, behind whatever barricades they could build. If they survived at all. Hyunwoo moved to the edge, looking down. The wound in his chest was sealed with the same foam he had used on his arm, but blood still seeped around the edges. He should not be standing. He should not be conscious. Yet he held his weapons steady, ready to descend into darkness. Only one way to find out, he said. The humans prepared to go down. They attached lights to their helmets, checked their ammunition, redistributed supplies to account for their injuries. Subin rigged the last of her explosives with one hand, her broken arm hanging useless at her side. G1 injected everyone with something she called combat stims, chemicals that would keep them moving even when their bodies wanted to shut down. When G1 tried to inject Velthara, the Taven officer pulled away. "Suit yourself," G1 said, smiling that terrible smile. She took a double dose herself, her pupils shrinking to pinpoints, before dilating wider than before. Velthara watched the humans prepare to descend into an underground nightmare, and something inside the Taven officer broke. "This is suicide. You know this is suicide. Why are you doing this?" Taemin looked at Velthara with his scarred face, his damaged body, his eyes that had seen too much death. "Because there might be kids down there, families hiding in the dark, listening to the Ravagers scratch at their doors. And if there's even one person alive, they deserve to know someone came for them. That is not logical." "No," Taemin agreed. "It's human." They went down. The descent was a ladder, metal rungs slick with something Velthara did not want to identify. The humans climbed down one-handed, weapons ready. Minna barely managed with her injured leg, and Subin could only use one arm, but they kept going. At the bottom, the tunnels opened up into a nightmare. The shelter system was a maze of corridors and chambers, all in complete darkness. The humans' lights revealed glimpses, scratches on the walls, bloodstains, body parts scattered like trash, and Ravagers. Everywhere. They came from the darkness in waves. The tunnels amplified sound, turning the battle into a wall of noise, weapons fire, mandible clicks, human shouts, the wet sounds of close combat. Velthara tried to maintain formation, but formations meant nothing in the tunnels. Everything was close, personal, brutal. The Taven officer fired their lance until the power cell ran dry, then switched to their sidearm, then to their bare hands, clawing at chitin with their crystalline fingers. The humans were in their element. Velthara watched Hyunwoo fight in the tunnels, and finally understood. This was where humans came from. Not the bright cities and ships and space stations. The dark places. The caves. The forests at night. Places where sight meant nothing and you survived by hearing, smell, and the absolute refusal to be prey. Hyunwoo moved through the tunnels like a ghost, his light off more than on, using the darkness as a weapon. He would appear behind Ravagers, blade already moving, then vanish before the creature even hit the ground. Blood soaked his uniform. Impossible to tell what was his and what belonged to the enemy. G1 ran out of ammunition entirely. She dropped her weapon and pulled 2 knives from her belt, one in each hand, and started cutting. The medic who had smiled so disturbing was laughing now, a sound that echoed through the tunnels and made the Ravagers pause. For a moment, Velthara thought the creatures were reconsidering their attack. They were afraid of the sound. Subin found a junction point and decided to collapse it on top of a Ravager swarm. She set her charges with one hand, waited until the creatures were directly underneath, then detonated. The ceiling came down, tons of rock and metal crushing dozens of Ravagers. Subin was caught in the collapse too. Velthara heard the demolitionists' laughter from under the rubble before seeing her emerge, crawling out with her one good arm, covered in dust and blood, still laughing. That actually worked. Minna had lost too much blood to walk anymore. She found a corner and sat down, back against the wall, and turned her position into a killing field. Every Ravager that entered her line of sight died. She fired until her weapon ran dry, reloaded, fired again. Her face was pale, almost white, but her hands never shook. Taemin led from the front, taking the worst positions, the most dangerous corridors. A Ravager caught him with both claws, tearing into his torso from either side. Velthara saw the damage, saw organs visible through torn flesh, saw what should be a death wound. Taemin grabbed the Ravager's head with both hands and twisted until something snapped. Then he pulled the claws out of his own body, used one hand to hold his torso closed, and kept fighting with the other. "Shelter door ahead," Hyunwoo called out. Through the next corridor, past a wall of Ravager bodies, stood a reinforced door, the kind designed to protect against explosions and breaches. It was closed, sealed, and from behind it came the sound of voices, human voices, frightened and desperate. "Survivors!" Ji-won shouted. The Ravagers seemed to understand. They threw themselves at the squad with renewed fury, trying to stop the humans from reaching the door. The creatures filled the corridor, climbing over their own dead. A tide of chitin and mandibles and claws. The humans did not retreat. They pushed forward. Velthara fought beside them, no longer thinking about tactics or efficiency or survival rates. There was only the fight, the desperate push toward that door, toward those voices calling for help. Hyunwoo reached the door first. He slammed his fist against it, shouting in his language. "Coalition forces! Open up!" From the other side, confused replies. The sounds of locks disengaging. The Ravagers surged forward one last time. Soo Bin detonated her final charge, using her own body to shield the door, as the blast tore through the corridor. The explosion threw her against the wall hard enough that Velthara heard bones break. Taemin went down under 3 Ravagers, his body disappearing beneath chitin. Velthara saw him pull a grenade from his belt, saw him arm it while the creatures tore at him, saw him smile with bloody teeth. "Get them out," Taemin ordered, his voice calm despite the pain. The grenade detonated in a flash of light and heat. The Ravagers on top of Taemin simply ceased to exist. The sergeant fell in pieces, torn apart by the blast he had detonated against his own body. The door opened. Faces appeared. Human colonists, terrified and hopeful. 50 of them, maybe more, crammed into the shelter with no food or water, listening to the Ravagers try to break through for 3 days. "Go!" Ji-won screamed at them, pulling children out, pushing adults toward the exit. "Move! Now!" Min-ah was still firing from her corner, protecting the retreat. Her weapon clicked empty. She tried to reload and her hands fumbled, blood loss finally taking its toll. A Ravager charged her position. The creature died mid-leap, Hyunwoo's blade in its throat. The human pulled his weapon free, grabbed Min-ah with his free hand, and started dragging her toward the exit. He was missing chunks of flesh from a dozen wounds, his face was more blood than skin, and he was carrying another soldier while still killing anything that got close. Soo Bin was not moving. Her body lay crumpled against the wall, broken and still. Ji-won ran to her, checked for a pulse, and for the first time, her smile disappeared. "She's gone. Leave her," Hyunwoo ordered. "Get the civilians out. We don't leave people behind. She's dead. The living matter more." They ran. The colonists, the remaining squad members, Velthara. They ran through the tunnels, past the bodies, past the blood, toward the light above. The Ravagers followed, but fewer now, their numbers broken by the human assault. At the surface, Hyunwoo called for extraction. His voice was weak, damaged. He collapsed after sending the message, finally unable to keep going. Ji-won worked on him immediately, her medical training taking over. She was crying now, tears mixing with blood and dirt on her face, but her hands stayed steady as she tried to seal the worst of his wounds. Velthara counted the survivors. 53 colonists. 3 humans from the squad. If Hyunwoo survived. Taemin was dead. Soo Bin was dead. Young Soo had died in the tunnels, torn apart while covering a retreat. 3 humans had saved 53 civilians, and they had lost 2 soldiers doing it. By Tven mathematics, it was a terrible trade. Trained warriors were worth far more than untrained civilians. The resource cost was unacceptable, but the colonists gathered around the surviving humans, crying and thanking them. Children hugged Ji-won despite the blood covering her. Adults helped support Hyun-woo's unconscious body with something like reverence in their eyes. Velthara understood then. Humans did not fight for resources or tactical advantage. They fought because someone needed help, and they would die before leaving anyone behind. The extraction ship arrived, and Velthara looked at these broken, bloodied creatures who had walked into hell and pulled people out. The Tven officer felt that fear again. Deeper now. Colder. These were not soldiers. These were something worse. Something that refused to die. That turned losing battles into nightmares for their enemies. That made death itself hesitate before taking them. These were humans, and Velthara had fought beside them. The medical bay of the Coalition warship hummed with activity. Velthara sat in a corner, their shoulder repaired by Tven doctors who had expressed concern about their continued combat after sustaining crystalline fractures. The injury would heal in weeks. By Tven standards, Velthara had been reckless to continue fighting. By human standards, Velthara had barely been scratched. The Tven officer watched the medical staff work on the human survivors. Hyun-woo lay on a surgical table, surrounded by doctors who kept shaking their heads in disbelief. He had 17 major wounds, blood loss that should have killed him 3 times over, and damage to organs that should have been fatal. He was expected to make a full recovery. Ji-won sat on a bed nearby, her side properly treated now. The field staples had been removed, the wound cleaned, and sealed with proper surgical techniques. She should have been sedated for the procedure. Instead, she had refused anesthesia, saying she wanted to stay alert in case something happened. She had watched the doctors work on her own body, without flinching. Now she sat quietly, the disturbing smile finally gone. She looked tired. Human tired, which meant she had pushed past exhaustion into something darker and just kept going anyway. Min-ah was in surgery. The doctors said her leg might be saved, but she would need months of recovery. When she woke and heard this, she had asked when she could return to duty. The doctors had not known how to answer. Velthara had spent the last 3 hours accessing the human database, reading everything available about Earth's history. What they found had shaken their understanding of warfare, of survival, of what it meant to be a soldier. Humans had not always been the dominant species on Earth. They had clawed their way to the top through sheer persistence. Where other predators were faster, stronger, or better armed, humans simply outlasted them. They hunted by following prey for days, sometimes weeks, until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. They called it persistence hunting. And it was one of the most terrifying concepts Velthara had ever encountered. An enemy that would never stop following you, that would track you to the ends of the world, that would still be coming long after you had exhausted every defense. Human history was a parade of impossible survivals. Individuals living through injuries that should have killed them. Soldiers fighting on despite losing limbs. Civilians surviving disasters through sheer determination to see another day. One case study made Velthara's crystalline skin crawl. A human soldier named Roy Benavides, who in a single battle sustained 37 separate wounds, including 7 major gunshot wounds and a bayonet through his abdomen. He had continued fighting for 6 hours, saved 8 other soldiers, and survived. That was not an outlier. That was human normal. Reading about us? Velthara looked up. Hyun-woo stood there, or rather, leaned heavily against a medical support frame. He should not have been conscious. The doctors had specifically sedated him. Somehow, he was awake anyway, standing, and had made his way across the medical bay. "You should be in surgery," Velthara said. "Surgery's done. I heal fast." Hyun-woo lowered himself carefully into a chair across from the Tven officer. His movements were stiff, painful, but controlled. "Your history, your wars, your survival rates." Velthara gestured at the data display. "I am trying to understand why you fight the way you do. Find any answers? Only more questions." Velthara looked at this human. This creature wrapped in bandages and medical monitors who should be dead a dozen times over. Why? Why do you keep fighting when every rational analysis says to stop? Why do you refuse to leave anyone behind, even when the tactical cost is unacceptable? Hyun-woo was quiet for a moment. Outside the medical bay's window, stars drifted past. You know what the worst thing about space is? The question confused Velthara. I do not understand the relevance. Space doesn't care about you. It's empty, cold. You make one mistake and it kills you. No mercy, no second chances. Hyun-woo shifted, wincing at his injuries. Earth was like that too. Everything trying to kill us. Predators, diseases, weather, other humans. We survived by being too stubborn to die, and by looking out for each other. That is not efficient. No, Hyun-woo agreed. It's not. But efficiency isn't what kept us alive. Community was. Knowing that if you fell, someone would carry you. That if you were wounded, someone would stay with you. That no matter how bad things got, you weren't alone. Know and stay. He looked at Velthara with those dark, tired eyes. You asked why we don't leave people behind. It's because we remember what it's like to be left behind. Our ancestors died alone in the dark. And we decided as a species, never again. No one gets left behind. Not colonists. Not soldiers. Not even Tven officers who think we're inefficient. Velthara felt something shift in their understanding. You saved me. In the tunnels, when my shoulder was injured, you protected me. You were part of the squad. I am not human. I am not even your species. By any logical analysis, saving me decreased your chances of survival. Hyun-woo smiled, and it was nothing like Ji-won's disturbing grin. It was tired and sad, and somehow warm. Logic doesn't matter when someone needs help. You fight with us. You're one of us. That's how it works. A human medical officer approached, frowning at Hyun-woo. You should not be out of bed. Please. I'm fine, Hyun-woo replied automatically. You have 17 major wounds. I've had worse. The medical officer sighed, a sound of resignation that suggested this was a familiar argument. At least, let me check your vitals. As the medical officer worked, Velthara continued reading. They found records of human space exploration. The early years, when humans used chemical rockets that killed dozens of test pilots. They kept trying anyway, kept improving, kept dying until they figured out how to survive. The database listed every human who had died in space exploration. Hundreds of names, hundreds of individuals who had known the risks and gone anyway. For what? For knowledge? For pride? For the simple drive to see what was beyond the next horizon? Your species is insane, Velthara said quietly. Probably. Hyun-woo agreed. The medical officer finished their check and left, shaking their head. But we're still here. That counts for something. Ji-won joined them, moving carefully but steadily. She sat down without invitation, her eyes on the data Velthara had been reading. Found the good stuff yet? The really crazy stories? I am not certain I wish to know more. Too late now. You fought with us. That means you get to hear all the terrible history. Ji-won pulled up a file on the display. This is a good one. Antarctic Expedition. 1914. Ship got trapped in ice, crushed, and sank. 28 men stranded on the ice. With limited supplies. They died, Velthara stated. They all survived. Spent 18 months on the ice. Sailed a tiny boat across the worst ocean on Earth. Then crossed a mountain range that had never been traversed before. All 28 made it home. Velthara read the account, disbelief growing with each paragraph. This is not possible. The environmental conditions alone should have killed them. Should have. Didn't. Ji-won leaned back, her hand unconsciously touching her bandaged side. That's the thing about humans. Should have doesn't mean much to us. We've been doing impossible things for millennia. We're stubborn that way. Admiral Kim entered the medical bay, his uniform pristine unlike the blood-stained combat gear of the soldiers. He was older, with gray in his hair and lines around his eyes, the kind of human who had survived long enough to see many battles. "Officer Velthara," he greeted. "I read your combat report. Quite detailed." "I attempted to be thorough, Admiral. You described human combat doctrine as psychologically disturbing, tactically irrational, and terrifyingly effective. That's quite a range of assessments." Velthara stood, proper military courtesy. "I apologize if my report was inappropriate. It wasn't. It was honest." Admiral Kim gestured for Velthara to sit. "I've read reports from other species before. They all say similar things after fighting alongside humans. We're difficult to understand from an outside perspective." "You are difficult to understand from any perspective, Admiral." Kim smiled. "Fair enough. But you survived a mission with a human squad. You saw what we are in combat. Now, let me tell you why we are that way." The Admiral pulled up a display showing Earth from space. "That planet down there tried to kill us for 4 million years. Ice ages, plagues, predators, volcanic eruptions, meteor strikes. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong, and we survived it all." He changed the image to show human settlements. "Then we started doing it to ourselves. Wars, genocides, weapons that could destroy our entire planet. We came close to extinction dozens of times, and every time, some group of stubborn humans decided, 'Not today. Today, we survive.'" "That is irrational," Velthara protested. "The logical response to overwhelming threat is surrender or retreat. Maybe for some species. For us, the logical response is to keep fighting until the threat is gone, or we are. There is no middle ground." Admiral Kim looked at Velthara directly. "You Tven have a saying, don't you? The individual serves the collective, and the collective preserves the species." "Yes, it is our founding principle. Ours is different. Leave no one behind. Not, leave no one behind if it's tactically sound. Or, leave no one behind if the odds are good. Just, leave no one behind. Period. That single principle has cost us millions of soldiers over the centuries. It's inefficient. It's expensive. It gets people killed." End quote. Admiral Kim's expression hardened. "But it also means that every human soldier knows, absolutely knows, that if they fall, someone will come for them. That knowledge makes them willing to take risks, to push harder, to keep fighting when others would quit, because they trust that they're not alone." Velthara thought about the tunnels, about Taemin using his own body as a weapon to protect survivors, about Subin laughing as the ceiling collapsed on her, about Hyunwoo dragging Min-Ah to safety while still fighting. "You turn yourselves into weapons," Velthara said slowly. "Not just your tools or your ships, your own bodies, your own lives. You use them as tactical assets. When necessary, yes. That is horrifying." "It is," Admiral Kim agreed. "War is horrifying. We don't pretend otherwise. But if war is necessary, if people need protecting, then we do what must be done, even if it horrifies us, even if it costs everything." The medical bay grew quiet. Hyunwoo had fallen asleep in his chair, exhaustion finally claiming him. Ji-won stared at nothing, her thoughts distant. The colonists they had rescued were in other sections of the ship, alive because 3 humans had walked into hell and pulled them out. "My people will need to revise their combat doctrine," Velthara said finally. "Everything we thought we knew about warfare, about acceptable losses, about tactical efficiency, all of it is wrong when humans are involved." "Send them a simple message," Admiral Kim suggested. "Tell them this: humans don't fight to win. They fight to survive. And they will keep fighting long after winning becomes impossible, because survival is all that matters. If you're facing humans, Your only options are complete annihilation or peace. There is no middle ground. Velthara would include that in their report. But they would add something else, too. Something they had learned in those dark tunnels. True terror was not facing an enemy stronger than you. True terror was facing an enemy that refused to acknowledge when they were beaten, that treated fatal injuries as inconveniences, that would crawl through hell itself to save a single life. True terror was fighting alongside humans and realizing that they were not the monsters other species feared. They were worse. They were relentless, unstoppable, inevitable, and they were on your side. Velthara looked at Hyun-woo sleeping in his chair, bandaged and broken but alive. Tomorrow he would return to duty. Tomorrow he would be ready to do it all again. Tomorrow and the day after and the day after that, until age or injury or death finally claimed him. And even then, Velthara suspected, humans would find a way to keep fighting. The Tivan officer began composing their report to the collective. They titled it, True Terror Discovered Me When I Fought Alongside Humanity. The first line read, We are not prepared for what humans truly are, and we should be grateful they consider us allies.